Development news coming in from the Parliament. The Delhi Services Bill has been passed in the Rajya Sabha as well. Remember, it has been passed in the Lok Sabha, and 131 versus 102. That was the vote that the Delhi Services Bill got in the Rajya Sabha just a few minutes back. It has been passed, and now, of course, the next step will be to get the President's signature on it. And then finally, it's going to become a law. So that contentious Delhi Services Bill now passed by both houses of the Parliament, the Lok Sabha as well as the Rajya Sabha. Remember, for the bill, the Delhi Services Bill, the Lok Sabha was smooth sailing for the government, but the Rajya Sabha was in fact something that everybody has had their eyes on. But now it has been passed there as well. 131 ayes versus 102 noes. That's the number, that's the figure that we got from the upper house a short while back. So the Delhi Services Bill now having passed both the crucial tests in both houses of the Parliament. And now, of course, the next step will be the President's approval. We'll keep tracking the latest from the Parliament, get you more details of the Delhi Services Bill. But right now, let's move on and get you another development that happened in the Parliament today. Do you get calls from random insurance companies when you didn't even give your phone number to them? Do you also receive messages of your birthday month by clothing brands offering a discount? Well, I think all of us do, and that is set to change. In a major step that marks India's journey towards establishing her first comprehensive law governing the use of personal data by private or government entities, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill was passed by the Lok Sabha. It talks about the collection and protection of private information, and the bill penalizes companies of up to 250 crore rupees for data breach. So basically, the new data law will strike hard on the first recipients of our personal information. So this might include our banks, restaurants, real estate companies, car sellers, insurance companies, and even social media platforms that we use, with whom we share our contact and other personal details, and who in turn several times pass it on to other related services. Now, while presenting the bill today, Union IT Minister Ashwini Kakkar said that it is not a money bill and that it seeks to prevent data exploitation, while the opposition said that it needs more discussion and that other opinions should be considered too while passing such a crucial bill. Listen in.
बिल में 140 करोड़ देशवासियों के डिजिटल पर्सनल डेटा की सुरक्षा की व्यवस्था की गई है। बहुत अच्छा रहता अगर विपक्ष इस पे अच्छी चर्चा करता, लेकिन विपक्ष के किसी भी सदस्य को, किसी भी नेता को नागरिकों के अधिकार के बारे में कोई चिंता नहीं है। इसलिए ये केवल नारे लगाने में लगे हैं, इनको चर्चा में कोई रुचि नहीं है, सारांश लाने की जरूरत नहीं है। नौजवान एक नई प्रगति की तरफ चाहते हैं, ये नकारात्मक राजनीति की तरफ किसी का कोई ध्यान नहीं है। लोग आगे बढ़ना चाहते हैं, इस तरह की नकारात्मक राजनीति लोगों को स्वीकार्य नहीं है। ऐसे में आज नागरिकों के 140 करोड़ देशवासियों के अधिकार के लिए जो ये बिल लाया गया है, रोड़े अटकाने वाले लोग हैं, हो सकता है अगली बार उनको ये मौका भी जनता न दे।
So the Data Protection Bill, Editors Guild of India has just about now tweeted and said that this is going to hamper press freedom. How do you look at this? Should this bill be passed?
Yeah, there are, protests and opposition from several quarters. I think it requires more discussion and debate on it. So in deliberations also amongst the parliamentarians. So I think ministers should consider it. You should have other opinions also. Then only the bill should be moved at.
Well, so far so good. That's what we all want. We get irritated by such calls and messages. They bother us at times, and we can only be thankful for this step. But every story has more than one side to it. And tonight, we also talk about the other side, which is that of the industry. The businesses who are just trying to do their job, working towards making you, the consumer, use their product or service. What's the harm in this? What's the problem if I'm told that I'll be getting a discount on my birthday for a trouser that I buy at a store? What can be better than my hospital reminding me of my next medical checkup? And for all of this, punish them with a huge amount of 250 crore rupees? Well, I take this to my panelists tonight and ask them what they think about it. I'm joined by Ashwini Kakkar, Managing Partner at InAdventure. Khushbu Jain, who's a lawyer, joins us. And Rakesh Maheshwari, former Director and Group Coordinator, Cyber Law and Data Governance, IT Ministry, also joins us. Welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. First, coming to you, Rakesh Maheshwari ji. This has been such a contentious and debatable bill, something that concerns all of us and something that is very crucial to our lives. Help us first understand, since you've been involved in the making of this bill, and just involved in working towards making it reach its conclusion, what was the basis of this bill and what does it really aim to achieve with in terms of data protection? Because it is, of course, a bill that is extremely crucial and a landmark step towards protecting personal data in the country.
So, good evening. Ever since the Honorable Supreme Court declared privacy as a fundamental right, it was important that, particularly when India is moving ahead with its digital movement, with more than 80 crore people having internet access, and the penetration of internet is going day by day, is growing day by day, it is important that the personal data of the people should be protected. And while, of course, the business must also grow. So this is the bill which has aimed towards maintaining, on one side, the privacy requirements as have been mandated by the Honorable Supreme Court, and also take into account the business growth, which must also be there. And therefore, it is a fine balance which has been attempted by the government and is a very welcome step today. Something which was pending for has been under discussion ever since 31st of July 2017, when the government constituted the committee to look into it and come up with a comprehensive law.
Sure. Okay, Khushbu Jain, as a citizen, as someone who is using data on an everyday basis, and we know this has been, this might sound like a very cliched statement in today's time, but indeed data is the new oil and it is an extremely crucial factor in our daily lives. How do you see this bill, specifically the fact that it provides for a high amount of penalty against companies and corporates who share personal information and contact data of users and consumers?
It is addressed to me. Let me just convey.
Khushbu, are you able to hear me?
This bill, particularly, the amount of penalties that have been talked about in this particular bill are much, much lesser compared to
Rakesh,
what really happens in other jurisdictions. Sure. And that is where I mentioned that.
Okay, Rakesh ji, I'll come back to you. Rakesh ji, I'll come back to you. Let me get in Khushbu first.
Yeah. So see, the question when you talk about as a user, I would say the bill has been, the bill which we're talking about has been very pro-user. And when I say pro-user, because it gives immense power and rights to the data principle, which is users like you and me who utilize services and whose data has been utilized by a data fiduciary for purposes of providing information to you. And when I say what are the rights, let's understand, see, till now we never have ownership to our own data. We never had any rights to our own data. We were merely subjects in the hands of data fiduciary. So it has given more of a power to the users. And if I talk about power, see the aspect when it comes to understanding whether you're providing consent that I want to be a subject, I want my data to be processed by you and you can utilize it. So that aspect has now come up where the bill clearly talks about that you need to take consent. You need to provide a summary of personal data which you're processing, and also tell me the underlying processing activities and any other information and identities also of all the data fiduciaries and data principals of whom such data was shared. So let's say today, what happens is company A takes your data for purposes whatever, and they utilize that data for, third time, second time, for 20th time and share it with their third party, where I never had a knowledge that where my data is going and for what purposes you're taking my data. So that's one thing, that power I have. The other part is there are a lot of data which are not correct, which are incorrect, which have been processed and utilized. So now me as a user has a power, a right of correction of that data and also erasure of my personal data, which I can request if the purpose is gone away with, the direct purpose which I've consented with. I can take away my consent and I can even request for erasure of a personal data. The third right which I have now is to nominate an individual to exercise rights on my behalf. It can be in the event of a death. It can be in the event of incapacity, like of unsound mind or some other situations that might arise. So that's another right that has been given to you. There's another aspect that comes is the aspect of these platforms now are bound to provide for grievance redressal for you, me, so that we understand and we can, if there are any grievance, we can go to these platforms and, seek remedy. That's where, after that is where, when you exhaust this remedy, you can go to the board which the bill provides for, that there is a dedicated board that may be constituted. The other aspect that come up with till now, there was no financial.
Khushbu, I'm going to request you to pause here, and I'm going to request all my panelists to please stay with me. We're cutting across live to a bill, another important bill that is being discussed in the Parliament, and my panelists continue to remain with us. Thank you to all of you. Ashwini Kakkar, I'm going to come to you. This, of course, is an important bill when it comes to companies like yourself and corporate giants who want to promote their business, who want to tell consumers that, listen, this is the product that we are selling, this is the service we are offering to you, and we're just calling or messaging you or dropping a text on your phone just to remind you of that we are offering this and you can avail of the services. What's the harm in this?
Well, I think overall, there is an attempt by the bill to kind of balance the three constituents, which is the individuals, the industry, and the government. But I think there's still a lot of things that still need to be kind of considered, conceptualized, and then implemented. I think the detailing of the provisions and the fine print still needs to be done. Conceptually, the responsible custodian principle seems to be good, but it is open to a lot of interpretation. That could be a bit of a nuisance, and that needs to be kind of thought through. Similarly, the bill applies to data collected online, collected offline, and for processing even outside India, but for services to Indians. And focuses more on principles and outcomes rather than modes and processes. There are a few dangers, though. I think one is that there are very strong exemptions for the government. Of course, there are exemptions for startups and for different rules for children and things like that. But the exemption for government could prove to be a game changer. First of all, there is lower protection provided by this bill than the Justice Sri Krishna report. This bill, as journalists have said, could impact the right to free expression. The data protection, the board that has been constituted is not independent, but is run by the government. So these are areas where, there could be some concerns. But at a more practical level, let us look at, for example, travel companies or airline companies or hotels who are collecting data. And if you apply for a visa, for example, You have to provide your bank statements, you have to provide salary slips, you have to provide lots of vital documents, and also provide your date of birth, your mobile number, and so on and so forth. Now, up to what level can this data be stored? When does it have to be destroyed? Can a travel company actually keep it and then call you back saying that, last year you took a holiday with me to, let's say, the United States, and this year we are proposing Europe or something like that? So these are practical things. But one very crucial aspect that this law is silent on is generative artificial intelligence, which is a very, very crucial thing going forward, because there could be deep fakes that come in, for example, on facial recognition, on voice recognition, on labeling, on videos. And I think, one of the other areas where this law is very different from European and American law is that publicly available data is exempt under our Indian law, whereas it is not exempt under American or European law. So if I put out something on my Facebook page, or if there is something on any of the public sites, then that is free for all, basically. That's what this law is saying. Now, clearly...
Yeah, but that's a choice you're making, no, Ashwini Kakkar. If you're putting it out in public, then it means that you've made that choice of sharing it with the public. Then you are not, concerned with the privacy of it. The fact that you've kept your data, your information public, you've kept your Instagram account public, or you've put out a certain information on Facebook, then you're making a choice as a user that it is for public consumption. It has nothing to do with, restricting my privacy or anything of that sorts. But I want to take this to Rakesh Maheshwari. Rakesh ji, one of the crucial points that Ashwini ji made is the fact that the bill doesn't talk much about artificial intelligence, and we know that we're living in a time of Industry 4.0 revolution. There is deep fake, there is machine learning, there is artificial intelligence, robotics, you name it. How does the bill deal with this? How does the government really plan to deal with this kind of an extremely humongous challenge that we all face? Rakesh, I think you're on mute. Could you just unmute yourself?
Yeah. So, sorry. One thing which has been clearly conveyed by my colleague is that something which is publicly available, of course, is something where anybody can utilize, and particularly the generative AI platforms scraped data from such publicly available data. And to that an extent, today, the kind of service that they are providing is also very, very beneficial. Of course, I completely agree that guardrails have to be provided, but guardrails have to be worked out, maybe through a separate legislation which is on artificial intelligence, or maybe incorporated into the Digital India Act as and when it comes into. So I do believe that maybe the such technologies which are still growing, where issues are not really known, let us wait till such time issues become, more crystallized. And of course, there is definitely a need to act upon that. And there will be, I hope, bills coming across to check user harms coming because of any such new technology.
Okay. Khushbu Jain, of course, this bill has a lot of provisions in terms of empowering the consumer, empowering the data user. But, specifically talking about pulling up and holding accountable companies and corporates that share your personal data. And, in our daily lives, we experience, as I said in the start, that we get calls and messages as reminders, or offering a certain service, or, offering a certain product, telling us about that. The other side of this debate is that there are people who would like such calls and messages so that they get reminders of perhaps, a medical checkup that is due next month, or just a birthday discount that month for a clothing brand, etc., etc. These are just examples. But there are people who are in favor of these calls and messages also.
Absolutely. So agree to it. If I give a consent that utilize my data and utilize my data for other purposes, which are A, B, C, D, which can provide, an added features of birthday reminders to, discount coupons to whatever my search history is. Let's say if I'm searching for, a particular city to travel, you can provide me hotel discounts and other things to it. If I'm opting in for those things, but if I'm not agreeing to it and it is not directly connected to the kind of services that you're offering me, then you should stop utilizing my data for that purpose or stop sending me messages for that purpose. So that's where the line has been drawn, that now the ownership of data is with the data principle, where me as a user can decide whether data fiduciary has a power to utilize my data for what purposes. If I want it, I'm giving you an explicit consent in the language that I understand. And I give a consent which is very clearly been explained to me. I even tell that it's not you, but I'm ready to provide my data to third party, which you can share. But at least let me know where the third party is, because tomorrow, let's say a situation comes where, let's say you get some calls or some cyber, case happens, a crime happens against you, and you say this is because my data has been stolen. How do you exercise your right? Because you really don't know how many places your data has been multiplied and shared with. So that's where I think the whole chain should be transparent, that I'm sharing my data for this purpose. I don't want it. You can opt in, you can opt out. I can ask for, erasure. I can stop the services that, okay, till now I wanted it, now I don't want. So I want to stop my services, so that they bring in their system. They tell me that for how long they will retain my data and how many third parties they're going to share my data in India and abroad. And that should be known to me, and for what all purposes, so that I'm aware about it and I can take a proper decision on that part. So that's where whole transparency comes in place, and a consent comes in place, and rights of an individual come in place, that there is nobody stopping in these companies to provide you services, but they can provide, I can be their subject only when I want to be their subject, if the data is not directly connected to the kind of services they're providing. Like, for example, if you're providing me a service of, let's say Uber, and I don't give you the location for the car to come, they can't provide you. So I have to give them access to my location. But if they want to get access to my other things, as to, other added features, other added things, I can provide them, and I can not provide them also. I can say, no, I don't want to provide, and they can't stop giving me services, because that goes against. So, that reasonability and that correlation has to be there now. And added features, you can still have it, but the response, the right is with you to choose. So,
absolutely. Ashwini Kakkar, on the other side, Yeah, Khushbu, I'll come back to you. Ashwini Kakkar, on the other side, the argument is that it's going to hamper businesses. It's going to not let companies do their basic job, which is to inform the consumer and, make them come and avail their services and products that they have to offer. It's going to hamper businesses. And what's the harm in, informing the consumer and communicating to the consumer? How else do you expect the consumer to know about your product and service?
See, the devil lies in the detail. I think at a top level, I think this is a good bill for the almost 800 million people in this country who are connected. So overall, it's probably a good thing. But the devil, like I said, lies in the detail. And unless the fine print is reviewed, like I gave the example of visas, I can give you 10 other examples of companies which are using data. Now, if a travel company or an airline, for example, has that data, what is the right moment that the service is deemed complete? What is the right moment that the data needs to be deleted? What is the right moment that, the company becomes liable or the individual becomes liable? So there's a lot of these key questions which still remain to be answered. It is not as though, this bill in itself is a complete document. I think there will be follow-on documents. And like I said, artificial intelligence is really open source. So, anybody can access it, anybody can utilize it in any manner that they may choose to utilize it in. So, a lot of these things are still big question marks, and we'll have to see how best all these loopholes can be shut. And it can be good for all the three parties, which is good for the individuals, good for the companies that serve them, and good for the government. And not just take a one-sided view or another. And especially as far as the board is concerned, I think the board should, in my opinion at least, be an independent body and not be governed by the government. Because the government is also an involved party in all these transactions. There are GST things, there are all kinds of other issues will creep in. And therefore, the body that governs and the body that adjudicates issues on these matters should be an independent body. And I'm sure these things will come out in the fine print, and there's still work to be done. This is work in progress. And while it hasn't gone to the standing committee, there will probably be another committee which, based on Justice Sri Krishna's report or other reports and other research in this matter, will come up with the right answers for all these questions which are at an operational level.
Sure. Okay. Rakesh Maheshwari, two questions. One, the fact that our data is not restricted to one particular location or even within the boundaries of our country. It's traveling to other countries as well. It is through the social media platforms that we use, the tech giants that are big players in data consumption, in data preservation and data usage. First of all, how are we dealing with that on, cross-border data sharing? And my second question pertains to the implementation of this bill. The fact that the bill says that we're going to trace the original source, the first recipient of the personal data of a user, how is that process going to be conducted? Because what, for example, in a situation that I've given my personal information to 5 different platforms and 5 different recipients, how does one trace which was the original source and then you penalize that particular entity?
Yeah. So coming to the cross-border data flow, as to where exactly my data can go, per se, as I mentioned in the beginning, the bill also continues to be very business friendly, and no restrictions have been provided for, except in those scenarios where maybe because of geopolitical reasons, the government has to take a call. So that's one aspect. But simultaneously, the bill also conveys that particularly for sector-specific issues, where maybe a higher level of protection has been provided for in that particular law, the other law will prevail. I can take a very simple example of RBI conveying that maybe certain kind of, say, financial data, for example, at least one copy has to be maintained in India. In such a scenario, the bill automatically empowers RBI and the corresponding acts to prevail over the general provisions of this particular bill. So to that extent, I do believe there are enough of checks and balances with respect to the cross-border data flow, that the data being moved, wherever the business requirement is there. Now, coming to the traceability part, it will, of course, will always be a challenge and will be maybe a subject matter of investigation also, as and when the complaint is made by the data principal as to where exactly it has originated from. But per se, the concept of traceability is more addressed in IT Act and IT rules and not in this particular bill, wherein the major focus is that as long as the company maintains the transparency, maintains the respects the consents, the period. In terms of privacy policy, it has to come out very clearly on all the aspects which have been raised by my fellow colleagues. And to that extent, it brings in accountability, a clear accountability.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there. I want to thank my panelists, Rakesh Maheshwari, Khushbu Jain and Ashwini Kakkar, for joining us tonight and sharing your perspective. It is, of course, a landmark step towards making personal data protected and, of course, a huge step towards redefining and strengthening the internet governance laws in this country. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective. With that, we are heading into a short break. News and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned to Mirror Now.
Driven by Hyundai Exter. Think outside, think